Hello to everyone and welcome. On behalf of the Environmental Justice, Climate, and Community Revitalization Program at the National Wildlife Federation, we thank each and every one of you for joining us this evening for the Clean Economy Coalition of Color March convening. We're excited about this particular convening because it is the opportunity to bring together some of the nation's most insightful Black, Latinx, Indigenous, Asian, and Pacific Islander leaders and advocates of color who are committed to amplifying ideas and recommendations, solutions that uplift the priorities and the economic interests of historically marginalized communities in order to guide clean economy policies and implementation. Today, we look forward to engaging in a conversation around infrastructure, investments, business, and economic development as communities prepare for historical infrastructure and community financing that stems from the federal government and recent legislation, as we know, relief dollars. We have a dynamic panel of women of color in honor, of course, of Women's History Month, connected to banking, financing, economic and small business development, as well as community revitalization. That's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to have a good time and we're going to talk. And we're going to talk from a standpoint of outside the box thinking, what is needed on the ground and what are some of those products and opportunities inside the financing world that we should be looking at and talking to. So we're excited to have these experts and we look forward to hearing about these issues that are at hand facing all of our communities. Thank you guys so much for joining us once again. And we look forward to hearing from their perspective and their lived experience. At this time, I have the opportunity to introduce to you our visionary who leads our work here at the National Wildlife Federation around race and around environmental justice, climate, and community revitalization. And that's none other than our Vice President, Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali.
Thank you so much. Sounds like we're going to have some real talk tonight. I'm excited about that and transformative change that can happen. You know, before we get started with our convening tonight, I have the pleasure and honor of introducing a special guest speaker to provide welcoming remarks, U.S. Representative Joyce Beatty. Many of you know Congresswoman. Congresswoman Beatty has represented Ohio's 3rd Congressional District since 2013. Powerful, powerful folks who are up there. And in addition to her prestigious role as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Beatty also sits on the exclusive, let me say that again, the exclusive House Committee on Financial Services. The Financial Services Committee oversees the entire financial service industry, including the nation's banking, securities, insurance, and housing industries, as well as the work of the Federal Reserve, the United States Department of Treasury, and the United States Security and Exchange Commission. So she knows where the money is, and she knows how to make sure that you're accessing the money. As chair of the Financial Services Subcommittee on Diversity and Inclusion, the Congresswoman leads efforts to ensure the financial services industry works better for all Americans, especially those who have often been unseen and unheard. Outside of her committee and numerous caucus memberships, Congresswoman Beatty is committed and a vocal supporter of early education, women's equality, conscious awareness, and the Office of Minority Women Inclusion, better known as OMWI, which seeks to increase the participation of women and minorities in all facets of the financial marketplace, among many other priorities. Although Congresswoman Beatty was not able to be with us this evening, she shared a heartwarming video that we want to open our convening with tonight. So if folks could play that.
Good evening. I'm Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. It is an honor to be a part of tonight's program as we celebrate Women's History Month and join together to chart a path towards a clean energy economy and an economy that accounts for the needs of Black and Brown communities on the front lines of the climate and pollution crisis. Climate change is something that we have talked about for far too long while seeing far too little action. We would be remiss if we did not acknowledge that climate change impacts all of us differently and has a disproportionate impact on marginalized communities and communities of color. In the United States, the majority of people residing near hazardous waste are people of color. 6.7 million people of color live in the 91 counties with oil refineries. And due to America's legacy of segregation and redlining, communities of color consistently live under a greater threat of toxic air pollution compared to white communities. Data indicates that people of color are more likely to develop health conditions such as asthma or die of environmental causes. But there are ways we can begin to correct harms and create a future that builds up the communities that have been harmed the most. Just last year, congressional Democrats and President Biden made a historic investment in ending the climate crisis through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, something I'm very proud that I was able to play a major role in passing. I'm proud that we were able to include more than $65 million to upgrade America's power infrastructure and clean energy expansion, $7.5 billion to build a national network of electric vehicle chargers, a historic expansion of green public transit, which will replace thousands of pollution-spewing vehicles, $21 billion to clean up Superfund and brownfield sites, $50 billion for what we call weatherization, to make communities more resilient to the increased fires, floods, and storms caused by climate change. I'm also very proud to share that more than 400 of the 715 recommendations put forth by the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis have been passed by the House, and over 200 have been signed into law. All of this comes together to form the largest green energy investment in U.S. history. We can still work to improve the efficiency and resiliency of American energy production, transportation, housing, and infrastructure, and make investments in the research and innovations that will find solutions to the problems we are just beginning to understand. We need to invest in businesses that have proven to be allies in the fight to end climate change. Business owners of color, particularly women business owners, are examples of these allies. It's incredibly exciting that the National Wildlife Federation pulled together this panel of experts to highlight the voices of women of color in this space. So thank you to the women of color for acknowledging the disproportionate effects of climate change in order to move forward and create a more equitable and green society. I will end with this. Congress and the private sector must come together to save our climate so we can find a path to a green tomorrow. And yes, I am Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, and I approve this message.
All right. Well, we want to thank Congresswoman Beatty for sharing those opening remarks, those incredibly powerful remarks that really point a North Star for us about how we can address the wealth gap inside of our communities and how we can also address the environmental impacts and make sure that we're protecting the planet at the same time. So I know that my mother is excited because she's watching, and I'm excited as well. And I'm honored to moderate this conversation, this discussion with so many powerful women, some that I know well and others that are new to the family. And I'm looking forward to learning as we take this journey together. It's really interesting that our team has developed a banking, finance, and infrastructure toolkit for the panelists, which we will share today with the audience members via the chat. So we encourage folks to engage as we move forward in these sets of conversations. both in being able to access the information, but also asking those pertinent questions that may have been, burning in your minds for a while. Now, let me just share a little bit about the toolkit. Includes details on federal and state funds and initiatives such as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the American Rescue Plan Act, Community Development Block Grants, and the 22 Fiscal Appropriations Agreement, and how these investments can impact small, woman-owned, minority-owned businesses and financial institutions. So it's incredibly important that you utilize, take a peek at this information, and then figure out how it best can work in your communities or in your families. Now, the toolkit also includes additional resources, including reports and research relevant to banking and finance, such as an analysis of diversity and inclusion efforts among America's 44 biggest banks, the barriers to racial and ethnic diversity in the financial planning profession, the status of green banks in the US, and recommendations by cities to fit federal structures to local needs, among others. Now, today we seek to unpack these opportunities, to have some real talk on how we can ensure that Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, Pacific Islanders, and communities of lower wealth are able to leverage these resources by engaging in a conversation with experts. And we got the experts for you around banking, financing, economic, small business development, and community revitalization. So in short, we have the opportunity tonight to have a conversation on how we make and help our most vulnerable communities move from surviving to thriving. And with that being said, let's dive in. I'm incredibly blessed. My mom is saying she's blessed too. I already know it, even though she's watching. And we're blessed because we got folks who don't just talk the talk, but also walk the walk, and know exactly what's going on. And what I'd like to do now is to invite them into the conversation and share who they are, their organization, and some opening remarks. And then we'll dive into some of the questions that folks have been sharing with us. So first, I see her on the screen, Miss Lysa Davis. I'd like to bring you forward, pass the mic to you for some opening remarks and who you are and your organization.
Thank you, Mustafa. My name is Lysa Davis. I am a Community Reinvestment Act officer with University Bank. And what that means is that we represent the bank in the community, and we take care of investing, reinvesting, and making sure that lending opportunities are available for those that think they can't get loans. And those that can't get loans, we teach them how to get loans, how to get financially capable in order to access banking products and services. We want to see people in housing. So we make sure that we invest in housing for affordability. We make sure that we invest in things like workforce development. We provide services as far as teaching financial literacy for small businesses and also for people, because it is important that people are fiscally responsible and also financially capable when it comes to accessing products that can help build wealth. So we work a lot in the community with these things for the bank.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to pass the mic to Lynette Phillips.
Hello, Mustafa and guests. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Lynette Phillips. I am the Director of Economic and Community Development for the City of Pontiac, which is a community with a population of 61,000 residents. We have about 1,200 small businesses, and we have a larger number of employers within our community. What we focus on are probably like 5 areas with our businesses. We try to connect and provide procurement opportunities in terms of like government contracts, looking at the 2nd and 3rd tier business opportunities from our larger employers. Also connecting our small businesses with resources other than money, which could be like marketing and promotion and mentoring and budgets and accounting and legal, all of those other services that when people say, I need money, many times they need something else, staffing and human resources. And then of course, mentoring and mentees, that connection with a larger company that you may go in on a RFP or bid for a project, or even to just work with someone that's in a similar industry with yours that you would want to connect with and learn something from, some benefits. But then we get down to accessing funding. I mean, because the reality is, there's still that need. And Mustafa, you mentioned, ARP and CDBG, and HUD and appropriations, but there's also, other types of grants that we, would try to connect with from the philanthropic community as well, and other programs. We try to reach out and look for like micro loans and revolving loans, for our business owners as well. So there are many areas as we look at, both our small business owners and our employers, and, just providing those resources for both, because sometimes they really do have, different needs. And then, of course, as I've mentioned before, like the second and third tier business opportunities, where when a larger employers, like in Pontiac, we've got, Amazon and United Wholesale Mortgage Company, that are large employers, but yet and still you've got your food trucks, your restaurants, your dry cleaners, shoe repair, those other businesses that really benefit from having these employees, available, especially now that COVID is somewhat relaxed, where people are actually coming back to work. And we've seen that in our community that, now, people are really anxious to be out and about, and our businesses are, benefiting, from that, as they did through the programs that we provided to kind of carry them through to this point.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those opening remarks. And now I have the honor of passing the mic to the Honorable Dr. Monica Lewis Patrick. Yes, I'm putting it into the universe. Just amazing, an amazing leader, strategist. So let me pass the mic to you.
Peace and blessings to you, Dr. Mustafa Ali. And I receive all of that love and generosity. I bring you greetings from the great city of Detroit on behalf of we the people of Detroit. Our work is deeply steeped in a framework of the Black matriarch. We not only love our children, we love our children deeply. And in that deep love, our work is around advocating for the human right to water, advocating for voting rights, advocating for human rights, advocating for housing rights. And so all of those nexuses where our people are struggling, we know that as our people do well, all people do well. And so we actually are invested deeply in citizens research. So we have an entity called the Community Research Collective. We also have a component of our work that is deeply invested in youth leadership development. We the people, we the youth of Detroit, along with the Great Lakes People of Color Water Policy Camp. That work is youth-led and it is regional, and we're super excited about that. And then, of course, we are still doing water relief in the city of Detroit and all across the Great Lakes. And so we really would like to put ourselves out of that business by being able to move forward with a water affordability plan, not only for Detroit, but for Michigan and the Great Lakes and the nation. And so that is the major part of our work. And I'm super excited to be here today and so honored to be with all the women panelists. I can't tell you, it's a pinch me moment for me.
Thank you. And we appreciate all the amazing work that you do. I would now like to pass the mic to Ilima Ho-Lastimosa for some opening remarks.
Elina ke aloha ia kākou pakahia pauloa, o au o Ilima Ho-Lastimosa no ho au ka aina ho opulapula o Waimānalo. He alakai au no ke kula nui o Waimānalo. Aloha kākou, my name is Ilima Ho-Lastimosa from Waimānalo, Hawaii, the homestead of Waimānalo on Kumuhau. Glad to be here with Ke Kula Nui o Waimānalo. We do community work, lots of restoration and cultural-based work that is ohana-centric, family-centric. We do community building, economic development, and just building up the status of Kanaka Hawaii. Mahalo, aloha.
Thank you for joining us. And now we'll pass the mic to our sister, Reshonda Young.
All right, thank you. And it's such an honor to be here today. I'm Reshonda Young. I live in Waterloo, Iowa, and I am the co-founder of Bank of Jabez, which is a Black-owned community bank that we are starting. We're in the process of organizing that bank right now. I also work with the Small Business Development Center, and I consult with small business owners through there. And I also work with an organization called 24/7 Black Leadership Advancement Consortium, for short 24/7 Black. And that organization was formed during COVID, and it was formed in response to COVID and small business owners of color having their doors shut at disproportionate rates and wanting to try and stop that in our area. But it was also formed as a result of a 24/7 Wall Street report, which in 2018 ranked Waterloo, Cedar Falls, Iowa, as the #1 worst place in the United States for Black Americans to live. And so as a community, we just figured there's something that we have to do to get off of that list. We're still on the list. We're #6 now. So we're moving down the list, but we're still there. And so we're just, as a community, we're coming together. We're supporting small business owners in major ways, both with technical assistance, with the marketing and accelerator program that I run, as well as with financial resources to be able to grow and scale their businesses.
Thank you so much. So I know folks who are watching are anxious for this conversation. So if y'all don't mind, we're going to go ahead and dive right in. I'm going to pose the first question, starting off to Monica and Linnette, but please, others, feel free to just jump right in as we go through these various sets of questions that folks have for folks. So there is a huge amount of federal investments and resources that we haven't seen in quite some time focused on our communities. But the question is, for the folks who are your constituents, the folks whom you are trying to reach out to and touch and educate, how aware are they of the sets of resources and investments that are currently out there moving? Monica, I'll start with you.
Not very aware at all. As a matter of fact, it's very discouraging in terms of all the different layers of dollars that are coming into the state of Michigan, 4.7 billion for water infrastructure. And what we know is that many of those dollars will not touch the communities that we need them to touch in terms of jobs, contracts, training. We are deeply concerned that our vulnerability stats have been used to capture these dollars and court these dollars into the state, but just based on how even disadvantaged communities are being defined is being very restrictive and narrowed as it's transitioned from the federal into the state hands. And so we're hoping that this can really be a moment of awakening around how critical it's got to be for us to tie bar state revolving fund dollars to workforce development strategies at the local level in the very communities where these dollars need to be invested the most.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Linnette?
So our platform is a little different because we are a community, a municipality. So in terms of just like our ARP funds, we communicated that information. City of Pontiac, we got $37.7 million. We held town hall forums, town hall meetings for the community to actually come, on site. We have 7 districts to come and really provide some feedback in terms of some recommendations, how they'd like to see some of those funds dispersed. We have a weekly city council meeting where it's another forum that we are able to communicate both in person, and the meetings are actually on like social media, Facebook Live and televised. So we try to communicate that information, publicly. We also, on our website, share information. Again, this is, related to ARP and other funding, but in terms of like our community Black grants, again, we have to publish public notices that, funds are available, again, to garner feedback from the communities. that is how the process is initiated. And then like going forward, we're still in the process of developing how these funds will actually get dispersed regarding the ARP funds. We required, or I'm sorry, not required, but we actually applied for appropriation funding from our, legislature and to get additional funding like that. But our process is to communicate through town halls, our website, and just even within some of our local organizations to, we try to disseminate information. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ilima, I want to bring you into the conversation also, because I know that, sometimes folks don't focus at the same level on Indigenous communities. What's your sort of opinion of what's happening?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here because now I'm aware of the funding. And I appreciate the toolkit that you put out, because I already clicked on the link and I was taking a look at it a little bit. I'm from a very small community. We have about 7,000 people, 1/3 being Kanaka Hawaii, living on homestead. And so for those people, that is my drive, is Kanaka Hawaii, Hawaiians. And so I think it's important that not only do the state bring the money in, but also disperse it all the way down to the grassroots, because we get forgotten. We're on the island of Oahu. The city and county of Honolulu gets all of the money. We're a little community that really means nothing to anyone. Our tax revenue is low, and we are sandwiched between very influential communities. So a lot of times we get forgotten. And I think it's time to shake some coconut trees and make some noise and maybe get some of that dollars and funding right down to the grassroots. So mahalo for asking, and I look forward to more learning right now, right here. Mahalo, aloha.
Thank you. Lysa and Reshonda, I don't want to leave you out of this. If you would like to chime in, I want to create the space for that.
I know that the folks that I talk to on a weekly basis, social media, are not aware. They are not aware of the money, how it's coming down, how it's funneling down, where it's going, what it's going to be used for, who's going to get it, and how it's going to be dispersed. That's like every single year that the money's come down from the budget, right? And so even though we have community organizations, we were having a problem before COVID to get 30 people to show up sometimes to some of the opportunities that we would put together. And that was with a gas card and a lunch, right? So the question isn't that we're not doing the work. The question is, how do we reach people? And then it's like, why can't we just send out a letter? This is how much money's coming to your city. This is how much money you're going to miss. And if you miss it, they're going to spend it a different way. And it's not going to be a way you want it to be spent. Like, how do we just break it down so people understand that money's coming? And if they miss it, it's going to go somewhere else if that's not going to benefit them.
Yeah, so I'd say very similar sentiments here. A lot of times people they don't know what's there. We do have community forums and meetups that we've done to educate people on monies that are available or that are coming available. And so far we have been fortunate to get a pretty good turnout for the events that we've been holding. And we're holding another one on next Tuesday with the SBA coming and Iowa Economic Development. And we invite a lot of it comes though from having these relationships with the small business owners that we're working with every day, every week. And so they come out because we're constantly in contact, and they want to see what's there. And a lot of times, even when it came down to the PPP funding and trying to get access to that, having them all come and having lenders and the SBA and Iowa Economic Development and everybody coming together to help make sure that our people were in the second round of funding able to get some funds that they weren't able to get before. So that's what we're doing here.
Well, I appreciate that. Maybe we could build off that, because we know that there are sometimes similar, but sometimes different tools that are needed to be able to connect with folks and be able to provide access. And we know that, there are folks who are looking for everything from broadband to roads and bridges and other types of infrastructure to those who are just trying to figure out how to fund, good ideas. So I'm curious about additional tools that you all would like to see to help people to get connected. I'm hoping also that the tools will also be a vehicle for accountability, but maybe we'll have that part of the conversation here in a second. So let's just focus on what are some of the tools or additional steps that could happen, could be put in place to help more folks to be able to, one, be educated, and two, be able to access.
Can I,
Go ahead.
one area that needs attention, because meeting the criteria, sometimes the criteria is not only not clear, but it could actually preclude the people that need the resources the most from getting it. And that's where, again, from a municipality, because a lot of our funds are either, from the federal funds or from the county and even from the state. So we have to actually work with our community, both the businesses and even our residents. I mean, there was the rent, mortgage, and utility program to help, provide assistance. But, because it was based on income, and even income, during COVID and not prior to, I mean, we really had to try to work to loosen that criteria so that the people in need could get it. And again, with this form, and we look at our businesses and we look at our residents and the needs that, the community, and it is the community that they have. I mean, we have to more or less try to work with people, at that low level. And I say that low level, meaning connecting to them some kind of way personally. And that is hard because you're limited in terms of your staffing, and, everybody's not on social media, but yet, and still a lot of people are. So just to try to connect, I think that's where, and I think we're getting that consensus that that's where the gap is communicating the information, but also being able to meet the criteria for funding and grants and other resources other than funding. These other organizations, your partnerships with various, organizations, be it SBDC or PTAC or, larger your banks and larger organizations in the community.
Thank you. And maybe we could also, for folks who maybe are newer to the parts of our conversation, for the acronyms that all of us are always surrounded with, maybe we can call out what those institutions are or those programs.
I'd like to say something, please.
Yes.
I want to say that, all of these acronyms like SBA and stuff, you come to a forum, you talk story, they give you their business card, they tell you to contact them, and you do, and there's no copy, no contact. They check the box, they did their job, and you never hear from them again. So having the capacity to, number one, be present and understand what's happening, then to write the grant or to administer the grant, but then to have the fiscal person that you thought you were going to have support from to be present and helping you, that's a gap. That's like, there's the resources, getting the resources to the people that really need it is the ideal, but the people, as the money trickles down from the guys at the top all the way to the bottom, we got pennies on the dollar that actually gets to community, if any at all.
Monica, I know you've navigated some of this. You want to chime in?
I am over here saying amen with Sister Ilima around the disparities and the gaps in terms of technical assistance. One of the biggest lessons that we have learned, that we the people of Detroit over the last 7 to 8 years, is from our rural partners and our small communities. And a big part of our fight over the last 4 years has been to unite our struggle, not only around our urban disparities and water issues, but really lifting that the urban struggle for technical assistance, for a need for investment in greater capacity, for a need for more dollars to go toward them either being able to sustain their independence in terms of smaller water systems, or being able to have an equitable and just consolidation strategy. And so we want all of those things to be on the table. And along with the things that we are asking for, some of the work that we had to do at We the People of Detroit, we had to shift away from our water relief work, from some of our advocacy work, to really gear dollars toward making the virtual shift many of our partners did not have the economic wherewithal to even go virtual. So being able to lift not only their stories, the importance of their voices, their work, how significant it was. I mean, to have the genius of the first water testing lab in the nation, able to then pair it with technology so that young people are being trained as lab technicians and taking on futures in chemistry and water biology. That is the kind of innovation we're bringing to the table. And so we're not just building for this right now moment of water infrastructure. We've got to build a workforce strategy that is connecting our universities, our HBCUs. We've also got to take water and infrastructure to those institutions. If they don't have a program, let's advocate for them to get one. And then I think there's amazing work that's happening across the nation where women are leading these concepts. I mean, when you look at the work that Denise has done, Denise Fairchild has created a template for the nation. We don't have to start all over. She has a toolkit that helps us look at procurement and able to bake in equitable and justice frameworks in terms of how we're bidding on contracts. That work has been done. You've got Brenda Coley, who just got an amazingly huge federal contract in Milwaukee with Milwaukee Water Commons, barring in water infrastructure, the ability to engage with community. And so just like Sister Linnette talked about, this cannot just be on government to get this done. We have to own this moment. We must deputize ourselves and take this opportunity to seize connecting not only the dollars, but with the moment that we're in. This is a Justice 40 moment, but we've got to make it be that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Lysa, I see you nodding your head. You want to chime in?
Yeah, I want to add on to that because I think there's a disconnection between, we call people disenfranchised, underserved, or marginalized. And these labels, I feel, have disconnected them from understanding that these government dollars are their dollars. This government is their government. They don't participate too much in voting unless you pull them to the polls. They're not participating in the primaries. They're not participating. And so when opportunities come, like the budget that has been put out, they don't see it as their government putting out their dollars for them. They see it as the government is doing something. I don't know what they're doing, but I got to get to work. Right. And we're missing that connection. Everybody has a phone, and as powerful as the meetings are, social media, Bernie Sanders is on social media, Katie Porter is on social media, AOC is on social media, and they're getting hundreds of thousands of hits, and we're missing the mark in the community if we're not on social media, because these kids, when we talk about grassroots efforts, they will make a spreadsheet, a link, an app, a portal, or this, or that within 30 seconds, and they will have all their friends and their hundreds of thousands of friends going to shut down Kellogg, because Kellogg is having them go across the picket line to shut down their website. They're making tools in 20 minutes that take us 2 hours, a conference call, an approval by legal, and 2 weeks later, we may have it done where they get it done in 2 minutes or 20 minutes. And so I really think we're missing the mark on helping to embrace and connect them back to their government, because it is theirs. And even Indigenous people, I talk a lot to Indigenous people on social media. They've been very much disenfranchised. So how do we bring them back in where they do feel like these are their dollars, where they are paying attention, where they are understanding that we're going to get it to the grassroots, and they're creating the portals and they're creating the community assets that we need in order to funnel that money down, because we can get the money all day. The money is printed every year. If we get it, if it doesn't get there, then what's the purpose?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Speaking of social media, Reshonda, I follow you on social media, so I know some of the information that you drop. Any comments on this particular area?
Yeah, definitely, and I agree so much with what everyone has said, and then especially with Lysa. And when you talk about how young people are, they're getting things done so quickly, and that is one of the things that the 24/7 Black organization that I also work with has really focused on, because we'll sit in meetings, and we'll sit in more meetings, And 10 years later, you're in the same meeting with the same people talking about the same thing and nothing's gotten done. And, it's time to stop all the talk and get things moving. And that's even why with the Bank of Jabez, it's like all these years of discrimination and all these, years of watching our people go and not just be denied, but disrespected when they go into these institutions. Why do we have to keep going and asking other people when we can do this stuff ourselves? We have the resources, we have the wit, the knowledge, we have everything that we need. We just have to be willing to do it. And also to hold government accountable and making sure that policy is in place to help us get these things done. But if we come together, we can get it done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And Monica, you got some folks in the chat talking about Justice 40. I know you have your own feelings about Justice 40. If there's anything you might want to share, and both the framework that it is, but how it could be more effective.
Well, it can definitely be more effective. I think we've got to see it for what it is. It's a tool. It's a framework. It gives us an opportunity to bring a new language of equity and justice into opportunities of procurement, of contracting, of decision-making. It is an opportunity. And it's like anything. My mother told me a long time ago, equity and justice, you bring it on your two legs. No one, no institution will make you equitable or just. You must be that. And so I see that as this same tool. We have to decide, the people must decide, and that is all of us. We must decide that we're going in a new direction, and that new direction is to be more equitable and just. And part of that framework is to introduce into the conversation Justice 40 at every turn. If we're not doing it in terms of procurement and contracts and how we're actually investing in, women of color owned businesses, small businesses, then we're not serious. And so the way to measure that is how we're spending and investing our dollars and who we're best investing those dollars with. It's also a great opportunity for young folks that are trying to figure their way out, where college may not be for them, looking at skilled trades, but also looking at starting your own small business is another way to be able to care for yourself and build independent wealth. So we're hoping that those decisions will be part of the conversation that we're going to keep having, because I know what I'm hearing from young people is they really don't want to continue with business as usual. They don't want to be investing in these bad systems and things that are breeding more toxicity, more bad health, more statistics. And they really want to be solutionaries in this moment. And so I'm really leaning into that kind of thinking, moving from trauma into transformation, which within itself is exciting. We've been stuck in struggle a long time. But I agree with Sister Reshonda. Really, it was through self-determination and cooperative work that we started investing in ourselves. So we didn't wait for somebody to decide to give us a building. Black women put their money together and we bought a building. We didn't wait on somebody to decide that our children were worthy of scholarships and investing in learning about science and GIS mapping. We invested in bringing those educators to educate our babies so that then we would have our own GIS mappers. So that is the vision that I believe that really is going to move us forward. It's making a way out of no way. What we know, the women that I come through the lineage of, that's what they've always done. They just keep pushing, they keep doing, keep creating, innovating, in spite of what everybody else is saying. This is a powerful moment if we'll embrace it as such.
Right. Amen and amen. With that being said, so there are going to be folks watching this video from all across the country, from Alaska to Hawaii to Puerto Rico to all across the lower 48. So Ilima, I want to come to you first. And the question is, what kind of infrastructure financing and investments are still missing and the needs that exist in your communities that you serve so there's a spotlight on it?
Well, I like to say that all of the women and all of the work that they're doing is what's lacking in my own community. I like financial, I like the Bank of Jabez. We know the struggle of redlining and only certain nationalities got that money, and today they're millionaires. And what we got, all our people is on the beach. It's our land, but we living on the beach. because we don't have a home, because all of the land got taken away from us, the people of this place. I listened to the water struggles. We got dirty water. This place was pristine, sterile land because of the way it was made millions of years ago. And because of outside others and the colonization of everything Hawaii, whether it's our language, our history, our culture, our land, our people, it's just toxic on all levels. And so how do we fix that? And how do we get this money to help infrastructure? You guys are just inspiring me to do more. But I'm really, honestly, I feel tired because I know how much work it takes and how much investment of my mana, myself would have to be invested. And I have Kevin Chang, who is helping us in the chat and sending out some information that we got to have a long conversation with a lot of the people like me in the communities on all of our islands, Shoutouts of Hawaii, who do the same work. And we got to come with one voice, one strategy, and not know that it belongs to us and we better get our fair share, because every time a plane lands in Hawaii, the people of Hawaii, Kanaka Hawaii, should be getting that money. And we've been denied for generations, and I'm sick and tired of it. Kalamai.
Mm-hmm. Linnette, same question.
You know, I really like the point that Monica or Dr. Patrick was making. I mean, it's so many different tracks, but the young people, the focus on them in terms of, you know, they are creative and they're going to make a way somehow, you know, in terms of actually having their own businesses. They don't really want like a 9-to-5 job. They want to, you know, do something that they want to do, be it, you know, whatever it is, but that's, you know, a focus there. And then, you know, back to Ilima, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but again, the resources that the community has, the land and the water and, you know, just that ownership. I mean, you know, real estate. So, you know, we've got to stay focused on that as well. I mean, you know, does the city own property? Is the property in foreclosure going to a land bank? You know, what about rehabbing some of these properties that are, you know, needing to be, well, demolished or dangerous? And then what resources, you know, can be provided? So then you look at like training, you know, how can I, you know, get a construction, you know, expertise, plumbing, electrical, construction. So that kind of training. Again, we got to look at all of the opportunities and resources. And with this group right here, we're all coming from different perspectives, which is so incredible because we have different resources, we have different opportunities, we have different issues even, and collectively, I mean, like you said, you get tired of just thinking because there's so much to do. But on the other hand, you get invigorated because, oh my God, you know, let's make a difference. You know, we've got our, you know, banking, our banks here and our, you know, finance. Today, there was a seminar, a workshop that Kamala Harris and I'm drawing a blank on the administrator for SBA, to really, again, for women, I mean, minorities, but, you know, resources for procurement, for funding, for resources. And, you know, of course, as women, we can, you know, take advantage of this, but we want to spread this to young men, older men, middle-aged men, you know, as well, you know, just again, because our community benefits collectively. So this dynamic group, if it's up to us to like, let's get it going, but we definitely want to pull our resources and expand to our communities.
Thank you for that. Monica, you know, I got to ask you the same question. You know, drop some knowledge on us about what is still missing and needed.
I think this so much is needed in terms of being able to better communicate what is available. And this is a conversation we've had from local to state to national. We have not done a good job of talking about all the dollars that are available in a way that is translatable at every level of our communities. We also have not done a good job of highlighting great work that's already happening in our community and making sure that those dollars are touching that work as well as the work that's already well established, because there are entities that are already well prepared, decades really in advance for what they know is coming. The other thing I would say is that this is a beautiful moment for us to celebrate and lift each other. I will say that I will be holding your stories with me as I travel, as I talk, as I share, that there is brilliance among us. So we won't be just stopping here in terms of the excellence and all of the amazing work that is happening from all of you. I know that my heart has been touched just by hearing Sister Halima's story. I know that I won't be able to talk about water or what's happening with land without holding your story, sis. I'm hoping that if there's anything that we can do as part of this formation, that if nothing else, your story will be lifted. People will know what's happening. I'm hoping too that the excellence and the brilliance that I've seen among all of you, especially Sister Linnette and Lysa, and also Sister Reshonda, can we continue to make sure, Doc, you've started something now. You've gotten an amazing group of sisters together that are already deputized in their work, but now to be able to amplify that work in a way that's bringing others along, that can get these resources out to our community. I think it's a celebratory moment. We don't get many of these moments as we do this hard work to celebrate each other, but to celebrate what else can happen when we come together with this kind of beautiful brilliance. So I thank you. I thank you for being strong enough and virile enough and brave enough to actually bring all of this delegation together.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't want to pass Lysa. I see something bubbling up there. So let you go ahead and drop something on us.
So yeah, so like 10 years ago, I went to Hawaii. And growing up, it's a state of the 50. This year, I learned there are indigenous people in Hawaii. There is a culture there. There are people there that are indigenous to Hawaii that are not, they're not Americans. There are Hawaiians. There is a purposeful miseducation in our country that needs to stop. I was there 10 years ago, but just this year I learned that I'm not Hawaiian. You couldn't tell me I wasn't Hawaiian when I was in Hawaii because I'm thinking we're all American, right? But no, this was and so I didn't learn it in history. There's a miseducation. And so I really do feel differently now about all of the indigenous, but there needs to be something done because I have seen more information just last week about what's really going on there. And it's really sad. And it's our country so there's a lot of miseducation. So I'm so happy that you're here. I don't know how to say your name, I'm sorry, but I'm very happy that you're here and you're speaking on it because it's very important and it needs to be said because we cannot continue in 2022 to keep disenfranchising and disinvesting in communities of indigenous people that need those dollars, right? And so I just wanted to say that.
Appreciate it. Reshonda, I'm passing the mic to you.
Yes, definitely. And Ilima, again, I also so appreciate the words that you said. And it's probably just been the last probably 2 years that my heart has been really heavy for the struggle of Indigenous people. And a lot of the things that I grew up learning and doing and celebrating, I had to stop. I had to just say, this is not celebratory. And even if it's pushing against the grain and people saying, well, it's not that big of a deal. No, it really is that big of a deal. It is a whole group of people that we hurt so much and in so many ways. And so it is a very big deal. So your comments and your presence are very appreciated. And so I will also say though, in terms of needs, I'm thinking right now, I'm sitting here with 2 internet providers that I have because our internet is so unstable sometimes here. And so when I'm in meetings, one will kick out and I'll try and get onto the other. Why am I having to pay for 2 internet providers? When our sister city, Cedar Falls, which is primarily Caucasian, they have one of the best underground internet servers in America. But here in Waterloo, where you can't even tell when you've gone from Waterloo to Cedar Falls. But if you're on the internet, you can tell, because I have to have two. And you think about it, you think about the kids who were at home trying to learn during COVID. And so many of them didn't have access to internet. And if they did, it was so spotty that they didn't have access to internet. And when we look at learning and we look in disenfranchisement, all of these things, if Cedar Falls, Iowa can have such a robust broadband internet system, why can't we in Waterloo, where we have a high population of various minoritized groups? You know, what's the difference?
Most definitely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I just want to take a moment and I just want to shout out some amazing folks who have been just dropping amazing information in the chat. One of them, of course, is Kevin Chang, who's been, just dropping words of wisdom, information. So we want to thank you, Kevin. And then I just also want to call out Imani Mehta, who also has been sharing some really important information inside of the chat. So I just wanted to thank you all, along with Elizabeth and a number of others. So we would be here for a little while if I called everybody out, but some folks have been very repetitive in an extremely positive way of sharing critical information. I wanna, because again, there's a lot of folks gonna be watching us, and we gotta really guide folks. So as these resources are becoming, more and more plentiful, even though, let me be clear with this. I just had a conversation literally a couple hours ago about this, that these are our tax dollars. We are continuing to pay, and folks are finally beginning to make investments in the places that they disinvested in with intentionality. So folks not giving us anything. This is due. So with that being said, I'll come back to our regularly scheduled programming and ask this question, which is, when we're talking about these sets of investments, there have to be policies and practices that we are bringing forward to make sure that there's real accountability in the process. So I want to ask each of you who would like to chime in about one or two sets of actions, policies, or practices that if we're able to implement them, that they will help us to be able to get the dollars to our communities who need them the most. So I'm gonna let that sit with you just for a couple of seconds. And Lysa, I'm gonna come to you because you got those fly red glasses on. So let me come to you, and then we'll go to the burgundy glasses.
So from a banker's perspective, I would say policy needs to change around CDFIs and how they disperse funds into the communities, because as bankers and the government, we put a lot of money into CDFIs. And in 2016, I left corporate America and started my own businesses and a nonprofit, and went to the places that I had funded and couldn't get a grant, couldn't get a loan. And it hit me, and they knew me. I had just funded that. I was too new. I hadn't been out 3 years. I'm like, you know me. So and so I go back, and my thing is, in the 1800s, it wasn't as hard to get money because they was just getting money because they needed it to build wealth. And as that has grown, moving forward and forward and forward, you got to have match dollars, you got to have financials, you got to have forecasts, you got to show cash flow. I'm a banker, I get it. But in the beginning of time, it wasn't that hard to get that money. So why, as we continue to grow the economy and try to grow businesses and jobs and people's wealth, do we continue to put barriers in place? So CDFIs, there needs to be a way to hold them accountable for that money, see who they're funding, how often they're funding, how they're getting the money out, what's going for administration versus what's going into the community. Because we've got CDFIs sitting with our dollars in there. Some of them don't even want to get it off their balance sheet. Why are you sitting with millions when you have all these businesses that need 5,000, 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, and the banks can't do those loans? And we're putting millions into your funds. So, and there's no checks and balances there. This has been a conversation that has gone on for a long time. And those are supposed to be the community development financial institutions that can lend that we can't. So if we're putting our money there, how do I then become an independent citizen, not with a job that's starting a business that needs to get a grant and I need $5,000 and I can't get it? So I think there's some things that need to happen around that, because they don't need to be as hard to get money from as banks. And we don't need to have all these barriers in place if we're doing it for places that are disinvested, when the people that created the financial systems were able to get money just because they showed up with an IOU. And now we need to have a binder. So there needs to be a lot of work done around that.
Thank you. That was powerful. Let me come straight on over to you, Reshonda.
Yes, so agree, Lisa, with the CDFIs. There's a CDFI that I'm working with to try and get funds deployed for small businesses, these micro loans. And when I looked at the application, and they wanted your blood type, it seemed like everything, just to be able to get a $5,000 loan. And I just came in, I said, there's no way. This is too much information that you're asking for this little bit of money. This is not what this is for. So fortunately, they did change that application. But how many of them are doing that? Most of them. And you're having to jump through the same hoops. But I'll say also the Dodd-Frank Act, the 1071 section of that act, and that was a lawsuit that I was part of with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that our group did end up winning, where banks are not, or the CFPB or Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was not enforcing the laws on the books that required banks to disclose, who they're lending to and get the information. And so that's one area that I'm really passionate about, because when a lot of times we're denied, and it's still happening. I just had 2 business owners that I'm working with who were denied loans, but they don't get anything in writing. They're told no, but they won't send out anything. They're often told no even before credit is pulled or asking for a business plan or anything. Because I'll say, hey, did they pull your credit? Did they ask for a business plan? And they're just denying them. And so with our group that brought that lawsuit, we do also have an oversight committee. And so there's some things that are coming down the pipeline to hopefully help that. But I also say, which is one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we do have our own financial institutions, is if people don't want to follow rules, they will figure out how not to follow the rules. And so sometimes you can't make people do what they don't want to do. They'll figure out how not to do it. You want to create institutions that want to do the right thing.
Right. Linnette, let me come to you about policies and practices that you'd like to see. And then let's see, and then I'll come to you, Ilima.
I'm going to say just, what in terms of both Lysa and Reshonda, in terms of just accessing funding through a loan, unless you have some fund of your own. And in order to do that, with a municipality, before I came to Pontiac, I was actually with the city of Flint. And we, what we tried to provide was some support to the businesses in terms of through our subject matter experts, to have them have some kind of training in terms of their businesses and how to access various types of resources. But in terms of like policies, we have ordinances for how businesses can be established. And that could be, through their licensing. Do we charge a fee? Do we reduce that fee? Do we give a discount for that fee? Do we, provide some, again, support to our small businesses, our food trucks, our food vendors? Do we help them get their nutritional labeling? Do we try to, provide some advertising for them and let people know that this is a good business? So from a municipality, it is through ordinances, executive orders, and our policies in terms of how businesses can can conduct themselves. But the funding is really an issue. And that gap funding, like you say, you need $5,000. You don't need it, 3 months from now or 6 months from now. You need it like within the month or within the week or within 2 weeks, which is realistic. I don't know what the solution is for that immediate, unless we're established, with a CDC or some kind of panel. But even with that, there's going to be some kind of review, but the criteria shouldn't be so magnanimous, so unattainable that, again, the people that need the funding can't get it.
Thank you. Ilima, and then I'll come to Monica.
I think what I'd like to bring up is the fact that last year there was an extra $20 million that was brought into the Native Hawaiian Education Act funding. And what I didn't like about that was all the people that had gotten previous funding the year before, they're the only people that got refunded. So they got double the money because of the pandemic. And no new people such as our organization who could do much more with much less because we choose to. And all of us have jobs that we don't get paid to do what we do, but it's our effort. And it's because of the people, especially our keiki, our children, and the next 1,000 generations that's going to come after that. We try to build them as leaders. So I think just everything is not meeting up. The lines are not connecting, and it's just a waste of resource, a waste of time. But we still got to keep on pushing. We still got to ask. And when you ask and you invest all of that time to make the paperwork that they're looking for, and then you know, and then you see the outcomes, it's really like you just want to quit, So I don't know. We'll see what happens with this. I hope for better results in the lower communities, the small communities that don't have the big funded grant writers like us who got to do the work all of ourselves. So mahalo.
Thank you. Monica.
I mean, for us, I think we'd like to see a couple of things. We'd love to see a community benefits agreement, especially at the local level. We know that it's more complicated at the state and federal level, but if we could really start adopting that as part of our toolkits for making sure that there is jobs, contracts, and opportunities at the local level, especially where those dollars are being leveraged based on vulnerability stats. I think another critical piece for us is with the water infrastructure funds is more transparency and accountability by water utilities and those water systems managers around water shutoffs, water restorations. We also found that, just because you have a public health department does not mean you have the rigor of oversight that is necessary, especially for your larger systems. We would like to see there be a greater tie barring of the accountability for those public health entities as it relates to anything that they're tracking or seeing in terms of waterborne diseases, things that could be tie-barred to lack of accessibility, lack of affordability. We really think that there's got to be a deeper drill down into that. And if we're mapping these things, we can actually digitize this information and have more of a real-time response from what's happening from a local to a state to a national level. And we believe that communities can be trained to do this GIS mapping, to do this data collection, to be a part of, as I stated earlier, their own solutionaries. So this does not have to wait for scientists or large institutions to facilitate this work. And I think that there's a concept that many have been talking about with the CCCs, those camps of young folks, no different than what we saw a couple of decades ago, can be a critical part of tooling up and reskilling the workforce of this country. So if we would tie those things together, we don't think it's just in isolation. We've got to do this kind of reinfusion of finances and dollars. It's got to be not a trickle, but it's got to be a tidal wave of resources that touch the community.
Thank you for that. Lysa, Reshonda, I'm coming to you. There's a question specifically focused for y'all. And it is about, where do you feel folks in the banking industry currently are? Are they preparing properly? And if not, what are one or two steps that they should be doing? Let me Let me come to you first, Reshonda.
So are they preparing properly? You know, I'll say there's some that truly do have good intentions. They don't know how to execute. And I say that partly because I've had several bank presidents reach out to me very recently, just wanting to sit and to get information. And you can tell when someone is sincere, oftentimes, you can tell when they're not. And you can tell when they really want to make a change. And what I'm also seeing, though, is that sometimes these bank presidents are wanting to make a change, but the culture that that's been built around them, or that they've been a part of, and now they want to exit that culture, it's not so easy to do that. And so you have cultures that have been ingrained for decades and decades, and there are people within those institutions that don't want to see a change. So even if that head person is wanting to see things change, they're not boots on the ground every single day talking to people face to face. And if that person or those people who are interacting day to day, face to face with the customers are not wanting to see the changes, they're not going to happen. And so I think there's a little duality to my answer there, in the sense that there's some who want to see it change, but then there's others who don't. And those others who don't are having more impact than those who do, oftentimes.
Thank you. Let me pass the mic to you, Lysa.
So I like what Monica said about the community benefits agreements, because that's the best way to get the money from the banks. And that's the best way to help make sure that the municipalities are doing what the people, the residents, need them to do, instead of doing what they feel they should do. And just not just for jobs, but for housing, for infrastructure, for broadband, for the banks are encouraged, to do investment for those type of things. And then it also helps the banks build relationships and other things like that. But to have a plan is what banks need. And if that plan is with the city and to invest in disinvested communities, it's even better. So that helps banks. Having CDFIs where they're going to get the money out helps banks. We have money to get out that we need infrastructure to get it out. So there were some cities that I worked in before I came to the bank that I'm at, before I started at the bank that I'm with right now. And those cities had no infrastructure, and the people didn't understand, the residents didn't understand, the community organizations didn't understand, but they didn't have a relationship with the SBDC. They didn't have a relationship with the housing authority. They didn't have a relationship with a housing nonprofit. They didn't have so without these relationships and the infrastructure built, banks are limited with what we can do, and we have to keep going to the same places we've been going to. In community organizations are a lot of times, when we're saying grassroots, they're not organized. And these conversations have been going on for years and years and years. So, I look at Gen Z, just keep praying, because they understand, they can go in and read the policy, they can read the legislation, they know how to put that together. And all we need is an organized grassroots group where we can put the money through that understands how to put it out, right? And a lot of times, I've been a banker for 20 years. That's been our biggest challenge. And so you keep getting the same old players in the game, getting the money. Like Ilima said, the same people that got the money the first time got it the second time. Even my organization, when I was not at corporate during the pandemic, I started a nonprofit in 2017. I did get an SBA EIDL. Because they had so much money, they came back. Hey, do you need a grant? Sure. Hey, do you need a grant? Sure. Hey, 3 grants I got before I started at the bank that I'm at. Just because I was in the system, it was easy, just verify information, and they could just direct deposit it. I don't know how many other places they did that. So there's always, with budgets, there's always an overage, and they gotta disperse it. I know that some banks have dispersed hundreds of thousands of dollars to the usual suspects because they had to disperse it before the end of the year because there were no other groups that could qualify for it or were structured properly. So we have to get this information out to people that are doing the work. We've got people doing the work. We've got people pounding the pavement. We've got people meeting, but they're not structured, meaning they don't have a nonprofit. They don't have a fiduciary. They don't have a bank account. So there's really nothing we can do but give it to the usual suspects and hope that it gets to where it needs to be. And so I'm all for a community benefits agreement because at least the people that are pounding the pavement and raising awareness and organizing community can get to the municipality and get their process or what their needs are into that community benefit plan. And then we can fund that and partner CDBG funds, home funds, HUD funds. Like there's so many ways to maximize those dollars.
Thank you. I know we're running a little short on time, so I just want us to be mindful of that. And so we got two more questions I want to explore. At first, let me just share, I'm a huge, huge champion for this thing that we call this new clean economy, if there's real equity and justice that's built into that. And when we look, less than 2% of the businesses, not the jobs, because we often talk about the jobs that are in the clean economy, the businesses are owned by African Americans, Latinx, Indigenous, and Asian Pacific Islanders. So with us understanding that there is a small percentage of us, at least in that space, how do we ensure that people of color owned businesses are able to leverage the funding that's necessary to be able to start your own business? So anybody who wants to tackle that one before we get into my last fun question.
I'll start with that one. So one of the biggest things, and we saw this with PPP funding, is that many small business owners didn't understand how to put together a balance sheet. They didn't understand how to put together their income statement or profit and loss. They didn't understand these things, how to actually do them, and they didn't know who to go to in order to be able to get that assistance. And so I think one of the biggest things is making sure that we do have small business organizations that people feel comfortable going to, and they're going to get the help that they need. I'm just thinking, like, I just picked up 5 QuickBooks licenses to be able to, download them and teach the small business owners that I'm working with how to use them and to be able to generate those statements. But they have to be able to know how to either do them by hand or have access to that type of technical assistance of somebody or an organization or a grant funding to be able to go and get those programs and have somebody to teach them how to use them and then what these statements actually mean. Oftentimes they're not for sure. And if they're not talking the language that the banker wants to hear, it may be a no-go just for that.
In there. Anyone else? All right. Oh, yes, please go ahead, Linnette.
Yes, I'm going to add to that as well, because a lot of times, and in various communities, or I'll say what, and I don't want to just kind of put people in a box, but, people have a business that's kind of like a hustle. I may sell dinners, or I may be a person that maybe does renovations, or I may even be like a seamstress, and I don't really know what my operating expenses are. Am I really even paying myself? What does, the materials cost? What's my overhead? What about gas? And I am a true proponent, supporter of, I think everybody ought to have a business. And so to really encourage, embrace, support people to say, you can take this to another level. And again, with the support and the resources and the funding and the training and, everything that goes into it, to do that. And again, I mean, not to minimize, but that is a challenge, to meet people where they are, but help them go to the next level.
Most definitely. Anyone else?
But also, can we encourage folks to do cooperative work? That there are some of us that just aren't good at all of the things that would it require to manage a business and manage it well. And so really encouraging our communities to really identify their assets, what they do well, and then how they can leverage that along with others to build that collective business or that collective power of interest. Because that's what's going to help us be able to sort of break through this scarcity mentality, this lack mentality, and see that there's more than enough for everyone if we'll work in cooperation.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. Thank you for that. All right, so our closing question. If you had the opportunity to touch base with either the president or your governor, because I want to be able to broaden it out for folks, because some folks might want to talk to their governor, what would be the one or two things that you would raise to them to help in the space that we've been talking about tonight? So I will start with Lysa.
Yeah, where the money at? I would say, I did see something that they're trying to build out some tech services to help get people involved to understand how money gets dispersed, where community groups are and things like that. I would say, are we working on things like that? And then either, if you don't spend the money the way it's supposed to be spent, like, can you communicate that back out? Maybe 45 days left, let's get this money done, something, or 60 days left. It's important because when people know that there's money there, but they missed it, but there's a little bit left, it would be good to have a deadline or a call to action right before it's too late to get it.
Thank you. Linnette.
I have to unmute. Just like, people received, I forget what those checks were, $600, $1,200. I mean, I think a business ought to really be able to just get money, but you should have to have some kind of a class, some kind of something that what are you going to do with it? And I don't need some high hurdle. It's like, just like in Michigan, we're going to, I think people are going to get like $400 just for your auto insurance, but get, I don't know, $10,000. But here's what you have to do to get that money, not the criteria, not based on your credit score or anything like that. It ought to be based on how I'm going to use this money, but also connecting the people, the business with the resources so that they do know what to do with the money. Do you need staffing? What's your manufacturing look like? What's your processes look like? So that when they get it, that they can be successful and that they have some metrics in place. And again, connecting with another mentor, another business, some other resources, what's the best price for paper or corrugated, how can you go about getting the resources that you need? But this country, we've got to do something, if we don't provide the means for people to sustain and make a living and take care of their families. And we got to deal with, I'm going to come back to this, mental illness, because anybody can be depressed or challenged. I mean, Lord Jesus, I mean, if even all of us, I mean, we all had a stressful day today, so we've got to deal with those issues as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Monica.
I would just say that we've got to really make sure that we are finding as many ways as possible to care for not only ourselves, but our communities. We are really in a moment that can be crisis, but I'm hoping and believing that it will be transformative. It's a connect the dots moment. These things are not happening in isolation. And I'm super excited, hopefully, that our governor, if she is listening, will take this as an opportunity to really bring young folks to the table to help them come up with a communication strategy, because obviously we're not doing a good job of talking to everyone. And young people seem to talk in a way that is at least understandable. It's straight to the point, no chaser, not a whole lot of formalities. So if we can come up with that strategy and have young people be a part of that, that could be extremely helpful in the days to come.
Thank you. Ilima.
Well, I guess I would want to talk to the president because the governor doesn't listen to our plate. and he's not running anymore, so it doesn't really matter what he does for the next year. But I think that the president needs to know that those of us in the middle of the Pacific, hanging out, sitting under the coconut tree, drinking our wine and beer, that is the reality. And we need resources that comes down to the bottom, us, to feed, to make jobs that are worthy, because people don't want to go work for $10 an hour anymore. It's not feasible. It's better. If the pandemic taught us anything, is we got to fend for ourselves, because when the boats stop coming, best you have food in your own yard that you can eat, because we got 3 days of food, and after that, we got nothing.
Thank you. Reshonda.
And I guess I'd say this to pretty much every politician out there is they really need to start prioritizing people over politics. There are people who need so many resources. There's so many things that are needed, and there are too many people that are playing politics while people's lives are really at stake.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you to Lysa Davis, Lynette Phillips, Monica Lewis-Patrick, Ilima Ho-Lastimosa, and Reshonda Young. You all are amazing. Thank you so much for everything that you do each and every day. We will continue to stay focused on moving our most vulnerable communities from surviving to thriving. And as Monica shared, from trauma to transformation. You know about to cop that. So that is so incredibly powerful. And now I want to pass the mic to the amazing Gabriela Rivera, who's going to close us out.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. Mari kompuche punyamnyen mapuchenyen inche awipinyen. Hello everyone, today in the Mapuche language. My name is Gabby Rivera. I'm Indigenous Mapuche. Our ancestral territories are currently occupied by the countries of Chile and Argentina in South America. I'm also the Environmental Justice Coordinator for the Environmental Justice, Climate, and Community Revitalization Program here at the National Wildlife Federation. And I just wanted to share a few things with everyone as we close out today. Today's convening has been recorded, and it's going to be shared with registrants next week. In addition to sharing the recording, we're also going to be sharing out resources that we gathered and collected in the chat today. We also have a Clean Economy Coalition of Color listserv that we want to uplift to everyone here. It's an optimal platform to share opportunities, updates, and receive information on resources that can help build capacity between our communities. If you'd like to be included in the CECC listserv, please add your email and name into the chat at this time. I want to thank everyone for joining the discussion today as we engaged in a conversation around infrastructure, investments, business, and economic development as communities prepare for historical infrastructure and community financing stemming from the federal government and recent legislation. I'd like to extend a special thank you to each of our panelists and featured speakers for joining us this evening, and I want to wish everyone a wonderful night. Thank you.